Hello and welcome to the Portage Health Foundation Community Garden Grant Application Informational Webinar. This is Dr. Michelle Seguin, the Director of Community Health at the Portage Health Foundation. Thank you for your interest in this new 2020 Community Health RFP. In this webinar, we will cover the requirements for the application as well as provide additional tips for a strong application. Let's get started. The purpose of the Community Garden Grant is threefold. First, we wish to increase local food production and access to fresh, healthy produce for community members. Secondly, we wish to provide opportunities for education, such as healthy eating and growing your own food across the lifespan. And lastly, we wish to create shared green spaces which foster social connection among community members. For the purposes of this RFP, a community garden is defined as follows: an area of land managed and maintained by a group of individuals to grow and harvest food crops for non-retail, personal, or group use, consumption, or donation. Community gardens may be divided into separate plots for cultivation by one or more individuals, or may be farmed collectively by members of the group and may include common areas maintained and used by group members. Examples include grazing beds or edible landscape in shared green space. For purposes of this funding, the garden cannot be used for retail. Applicant eligibility. To be eligible to apply for a grant under this program, the applicant must be recognized by the IRS as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, a local unit of government, or a public institution of education. The applicant must be domiciled in Baraga, Houghton, Keweenaw, and/or Ontonagon counties in the state of Michigan. Applicants must have a current certified financial audit or 990, 990EZ, or 990N filing, and have the necessary personnel to complete the project and reporting requirements. Lastly, the applicant must have a current license to solicit charitable contributions as described below. Applicants must also demonstrate strategies that will enhance, expand, or create new community garden resources that encourage healthy eating and local food production. New and existing community gardens are eligible to apply. Applicants must include the site plan and needed materials list. Allowable expenses include equipment, irrigation supplies, seeds, plant starts, landscaping, scales, signage, or other necessary items to create, update, or enhance a garden space, and to execute outreach or educational activities. Unallowable expenses include labor and utility service charges. Additionally, applicants must identify a clear path to long-term sustainability. Applicants must demonstrate how the grant activities will be sustained outside of the one-year grant period. If awarded, the awardee will be required to report food production, community engagement, and outreach activities on an end-of-season basis by pounds or count respectively. Preference will be given to projects which are part of the overall recreation plan or community development plan where the project will be located. Application exclusion criteria include loans, litigation, lobbying activities, organizations that discriminate based on age, race, ethnic origin, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or gender. Proposals where grants funded will be used to solely maintain existing programs or fill a budget gap for current services. Individuals or families, or for-profit entities. Of note, if a group of individuals wish to apply, they must partner with their local municipality or a community nonprofit to be eligible for funding consideration. The partner, municipality, or community nonprofit will be the primary applicant and will serve as the fiduciary responsible for all reporting requirements. Now, moving on to tips for a strong application. Tip number 1, detail the geographic location of the garden, the size, the community which it serves, and if it is a new or existing garden. Provide information about the neighborhood and or people served by the garden. Provide the dimensions of the garden and, if known, previous amounts of food produced by the garden. Remember that reviewers may not be familiar with the location or type of garden, so provide helpful descriptions, such as whether it has individual plots or one large garden with volunteer help, the type of neighborhood, and nearby institutions. Tip number 2, describe the organizations and individuals involved in the planning, funding, and maintenance of the garden. Include a description of how volunteers are recruited and how food is distributed. List your partners that help plan, fund, or maintain the garden, such as neighbors, nearby schools, local businesses, etc. Describe who communicates with volunteers and how. An example may include an email list from the team lead or lead gardener, which describes duties and details for scheduled work sessions, etc. Also, include details on when food is ready to be harvested, who makes sure it is picked, and where does it go. So strategies include scheduled picking days where volunteers may take a share of the food harvested, and then the remainder of that harvest is donated, to a local food pantry or other community entity. Tip number 3, detail any educational activities related to the garden, such as how do people learn about the food being grown and how to prepare and eat it. Provide any specific educational activities that take place in the garden. Examples may include partnership with a school or a before or after school program to incorporate the garden into their curriculum. Invite a dietitian to do monthly informational sessions in the garden. Invite garden volunteers to host community cooking classes. Or lastly, host a community harvest party where neighbors can share recipes and a meal with one another. Tip number 4, describe specifically what the funding will be used for and the planned timeline for the project. Describe what you intend to purchase with the PHF grant and provide some narrative description about why those purchases are important to the garden. An example of such a description is below. Additionally, provide a brief timeline outlining how you intend to successfully implement your plan. This timeline should include specific garden activities, anticipated dates of completion, as well as an assignment of who is responsible for completing these tasks. Tip number 5, describe the intended outcomes of the garden project and what benefits the garden will bring to the community it serves. Specify who will benefit from the garden and what you hope to accomplish. Answers are dependent on your specific garden and community. If awarded, the awardee will be required to report food production, community engagement, and outreach activities on an end-of-season basis by pounds or count respectively. Tip number 6, budget template. Your budget must be specific and itemized in your grant application. Please review the list of allowable and unallowable expenses in this webinar as you consider items for your budget and application. If you anticipate other funding or in-kind donations, please list them. Reviewers appreciate seeing these types of partnerships. The timeline for the Community Garden RFP is listed here for your reference. The letter of inquiry will be due on February 10th. The final grant application will be due on March 20th, and grant awardees will be announced on April 10th. Please send completed applications to Portage Health Foundation, either by mail or may be submitted via email at the addresses and websites below. For any additional questions regarding this RFP, please contact our office at phone number 906-523-5920 or via email at info@phfgive.org. Thank you for your time and interest in this RFP and for attending this informational webinar.